It was interesting when I was recruited to join the cooperative model, a lot of people were saying, well, you've not been in cooperatives before, you actually come from publicly listed retailers. Mm-hmm. So what would you know?
How do you build that work ethic until you get into doing things?
Yes. How you sort of, it's a...
hands-on.
Yeah, absolutely. And my observation is I think there's a bit of a, I'm seeing emerging directors all the time. I've probably seen 75 this week.
How much do you manage the risk? How much, because all risks can be managed, but how much time and effort you have to put in a risk.
Just right in the strategic context, not just for today, but where you're heading, where the board has signed off as a strategy. Okay, does your board composition, do your risk frameworks marry up to that strategic ambition?
One trend I have seen across the years of the survey of that most of the charities or most of the not-for-profits, they are more and more worried about sustainability, and more of the boards are actively talking about mergers and acquisitions.
I think it's fiscal reality in terms of organisations not being able to continue to deliver on their mission in a sustainable manner on their own.
How do you bridge the gap between what the go-to culture to deliver that purpose and mission and from where you are?
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you.
Welcome, Trent. How are you?
Good, Deb. Thank you for the opportunity to have a chat.
Thank you for your time today. As I was going through your profile and CV, it's just fairly descriptive and fairly a lot. And then may I say, I'm glad to sit with you and understand your views on many things. Before we go there, could you share a bit more of your experience and background?
Yeah, sure. So I born and raised in Adelaide and did my high schooling there. Took a part-time job to get a car, basically raised funds to get a car in retail, and I loved retail. So I deferred from uni ended up doing 25 years in retail, really loved it. Then I took my first CEO role and it was a cooperative, and I'd not come across the model before. But I came to learn there are international principles of cooperation, and I just fell in love with the model. And so the board were happy to recruit me as a CEO because it was about being member-centric, and I was very used to being customer-centric. So there was quite an affinity there, and the cooperative model's really taken me on a journey for the last 25 years of mutuality, cooperation, the importance of community. And so it shaped a lot of my thoughts and beliefs about business and the importance of giving back, and how quite often people's lives, and then sometimes in small business, their businesses are intertwined, you can't separate them. The importance of planet is also come across in my later board roles, and so that's taken me to the point now where I'm professional company director. Typically I'm a professional independent director on member-owned and member-governed boards, typically working with mission and purpose of people and planet. They're not all my roles, but they're primarily the roles. So a lot of my portfolio is to do with B Corp or sustainability, or working with groups of individual small businesses and members that have come together to have a better outcome for themselves. And so I enjoy that work.
Wow. Retail, and there's two parallels to be drawn there. Working as a customer service, focusing on customer service, and on the other side, focusing on a purpose of an organization, for purpose versus customer driven. And how was that easier for you to move away from retail and just fit into a co-op or a member driven model?
Yes, it was interesting when I was recruited to join the cooperative model. A lot of people were saying, well, you've not been in cooperatives before, you actually come from publicly listed retailers. So what would you know? But I think what was my denominator, I was a servant leader at heart. So whether it was retail or member-owned, I think I was hardwired to be of service. And I look back now, and it was always there. I hadn't necessarily recognised it in myself. So the transition from being customer-centric to member-centric to, I suppose now, stakeholder-centric has been a reasonably easy transition for me, because I think fundamentally at heart I'm a servant leader.
And could you also explain, growing up, how have you evolved to have those beliefs and values and purpose of your life. How has that come to play through your, growing up, education and work experience? How has that evolved and molded you into a servant leader?
Yeah, I think even through school, I ended up being, the captain of the various sports teams, footy or basketball or tennis or whatever. I never saw myself as that, but others saw that in me. And I was coming out of high school and I'd enrolled and was ready to become a vet. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't going to be working with people at all. I was going to be with animals. But I think others saw in me like leadership qualities, if you want to call it that. And so when I started in sort of true workforce and I was asked to join the management program at a young age, it was something I was interested and keen to pursue because I really enjoyed the casual involvement that I had working with the people. Mm-hmm. And it really sort of evolved from there. It took off, and I had in retail as a great organisation, great sector to get lots of responsibility early at a young age. Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoyed that. That started to shape, how you deal and work and think.
Getting your hands dirty.
Yeah.
How do you build that work ethic until you get into doing things?
Yes. How you sort of it's a really
hands-on.
Yeah, absolutely. And customers in your face. I'd love to see young school kids come through that would work for us at the end of the day to help clean the store and stuff. And then they might transition in the school holidays to actually be on the shop floor. And at home, they're probably getting away with murder, but they don't get away with murder when there's a customer in their face. And so they matured pretty quick. And so it was great. So I think sort of understanding that, you were there to serve customers really helped me sort of start to shape my thinking around that. And then as I got into the cooperative movement and you sort of understood that we all have a responsibility and you can get a lot done if nobody cares who gets the credit, you can get a lot done. And so I think that helped me understand that servant leadership can be a wonderful means to an end as well. And that's sort of really been sort of how I've learned to continue to apply the craft, become a student of it, become a student of the cooperative and mutual movement. And I think it's sort of really helped shape what I choose to do and not to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Could you also, from your point of view, your observation on how has not-for-profits evolved in the last couple of decades in terms of the way they operate, the way they resource, the way they strategize, and the way they govern?
Yes. Look, it's a great question. It's been a steady and constant, I think, growth and improvement, accelerated in parts by royal commissions and greater regulation and AICD, which is the Australian Institute of Company Directors, which I'm very involved with. They've been doing an annual study for 16 years. So they've been able to benchmark a lot of these improvements and trends over time. And clearly the overall standard of governance across the not-for-profit sector continues to rise. I often think it's a very broad definition, the not-for-profit sector.
Yeah.
And so there are multiple realities for organisations and subsectors. And so I hesitate to brand and generalise, but as an overall comment, I think the composition of boards has improved, the understanding of governance has improved. The need to have sustainable business models is, as opposed to just being so passionate about mission, it's got to have that combination has really improved in recent times. I think it continues to be a challenge. I think the regulatory expectations on something like aged care, healthcare, continues to grow, and so we're not-for-profit businesses with for-profit challenges, and so how we resource that, respond to that. I think we're incredibly resilient and adaptive as a broader sector, and I think that stood us in good stead. I think what drives us is our belief in mission and purpose, and so we find a way. But increasingly, that's getting more and more trickier as sort of expectations continue to grow, and our role in society becomes even more important because government can't fill the void. For-profit businesses can't fill the void. We really have to continue to step up. And so how we maintain that growth and resilience is really important for the communities, I think.
In terms of a couple of royal commissions which have led to in specific sectors, and from a governance point of view, people who are on the boards, how can they be in tune with the realities of regulations? Because as you would, in your experience, there are a lot of diverse board directors on the boards. They might not come from the sector. They are coming from specific skills they have, and they are keen to support the mission of the organization. So what's the learning curve for them? Because, one is, it's highly regulated, those some sectors, but what's the learning curve for majority of board members who are coming into a sector and saying that, I want to be a voluntary board member of this organization?
This is quite steep. And I think increasingly you're finding that not-for-profit boards are adopting good practices. In the disability space, there's a pre-boarding element before the onboarding with NDIS checks, especially if directors are going to be in organisations that are working with children. And so there's the whole selection process, then there's the pre-boarding, and then there's the onboarding. And the onboarding really has to be thorough enough so directors really understand their duties and responsibilities, not just as a director, but for the various regulatory requirements and expectations they might have placed on them. And so that's a really important piece to bring them up to speed with. And then having a buddy system to help them acclimatise to their board craft, which is very, very different, how they sort of work with an executive team as a board member. That comes through, I think, experience and coaching through the roles. The chair plays an important role in that as well. But I think assimilation with the business through, being exposed to different events, different opportunities that management might be able to bring a new director in on. These are important ways for them to really start to understand the business. At Rocky Bay, we bring directors, invite directors to come along to our awards presentations, our quarterly acknowledgements of service, as well as outstanding customer service. And we hear customer stories, good and bad, about what we learned, what we did really, really well. And they get to understand, the mission, how it plays out in real life. You've got real people talking about their experiences, and that helps them understand the culture of the organisation and why it's important that we preside over that and protect, a great culture. They're multifaceted parts of bringing a new director on board and helping them get up to speed. It's really, really important because there's not a lot of a honeymoon period. We need everybody, with their oars in the water, and so we try and get them up to speed as quickly as possible. It's really important.
From a perspective of small and mid-sized providers who might not have resources as the larger providers, because large organizations can afford to have senior leaders who can be chairs and spend time and effort. And when you are running voluntary boards, which are typically for small and mid-sized not-for-profits and charities, one is, how do you attract the right people to be coming on the boards? And second, how do you, again, that learning curve, how do you get that ownership? Because as you said, it's more riskier now to be on the board, and more, ones need to be hands-on to understand what's happening in the sector.
Yes, I think to start off with, I think you need to be able to offer a clear proposition to a prospective board member in terms of purpose, mission, what you stand for. I think directors need to understand, prospective directors need to understand what role would they be asked to take on, what role would they be fulfilling if they were to accept a position on the board, if one were offered. So I think you need to be clear about where they sit in the composition and the mix and the expectations that you might have for them individually. In terms of not-for-profits actually getting or accessing these additional directors, my observation is I think there's a bit of a, I'm not too sure whether there's a gap or a void or an opportunity. I'm not too sure how best to express it. But, I'm very privileged to facilitate the company directors course, the Australian Institute of Company Directors. So I'm seeing emerging directors all the time. I've probably seen 75 this week. And all of them are keen to actually understand, how do I get my board CV underway? Because it's one thing to do the course, but it doesn't teach you anything about board craft. You have to be on a board to develop that. And if you want to get onto large boards, then you've got to start somewhere. And increasingly we promote the sector as a great way for people to make a difference, but also start to commence their board craft. So of late, there's been a lot of discussion about the opportunities of advisory positions. And I know many not-for-profits that have used this approach, where they might look to appoint an emerging director as an advisor, a specialist advisor to one of the board subcommittees or to the board. They get the opportunity to interact at that board level. The board get an opportunity to see them interacting. Quite often some of those people go on to be appointed onto the boards when there's a vacancy. But it gives them the opportunity to provide, their experience, get if you like, an accreditation for being on or advising boards, and that really helps them with the subsequent roles. And these people are very happy to provide that without any expectation of fees or remuneration. They're just keen to make a start. And I know some organisations are using that very effectively, and other people haven't even thought about it. So I think there's a great opportunity. AICD are running an observership program on the East Coast that allows selected people that join a program to come in and observe more formally. And so it's quite a structured approach. I know later this year, AICD will be running an opportunity for 6 not-for-profit boards to meet with emerging directors who are seeking to get onto roles. So they're seeking to be an introduction facilitator for people, the boards that want them, people that are looking for them. I think there's a lot more opportunities and resources out there for not-for-profits at little or no cost that they're not taking advantage of.
I think that's a very soft landing pad as an advisory / observatory role from somebody who's not a board director, but who want to get into the path and observe and then see if it's a good fit or not. I think it's a good to test how it's a good fit or not from a not-for-profit point of view as well.
Definitely.
So it's a good playing ground. In terms of risk management and governance, it varies, how risk is, how much do you manage the risk? How much, because all risks can be managed, but how much time and effort you have to put in a risk. How does large organization with boards can understand and manage risks in not to its completeness, but to optimally understand and have solutions around it?
I'm enjoying these questions. They're top of mind for me. Quite often I'm working with people who are sort of new to the craft of directorship, and they say, "Oh my God, there's so much risk. Why would you be a director?" And I say, "Look, if you've got a wonderful mission, a great executive team, and a wonderful board, it can be really exhilarating, the difference you can make to people and planet. So don't be discouraged by it." But what I do say to them is, quite often that we talk about fit for purpose governance or minimum viable governance, and I often suggest we think about what I call Goldilocks governance. Not too simple because you'll miss risks, not too complex because you just gum up management. Just right in the strategic context, not just for today, but where you're heading, where the board has signed off as a strategy. Okay, does your board composition, do your risk frameworks marry up to that strategic ambition? And I think that's where boards have got to focus. There's the hygiene risks that we expect management to be across, and part of our duty is to oversight that. But I think part of our role is also to provide insights and foresights on the emerging risks. And that's where we need to take a view on, well, there's lots to worry about if we don't need to have really strong risk tolerances and appetites around certain dimensions, but of things that are critical to future mission. If they're not good enough now relative to our ambition, then we're compelled to revisit our risk frameworks, our competencies around the board, our competencies in management, our appetites around just how much we're prepared to take on and have as a residual risk as a board. that really needs to be considered in greater context. And so you can have quite simple frameworks if you have a simple business. But if your risks are dialing up and you're exposing yourself and mission to greater risks, it's incumbent upon the board to assess that risk and dial it up. And I often hear of boards that are really struggling with the growing requirement of oversight, whether it be climate or AI or whatever the topic might be. And I encourage them to think about the role of their committees in helping them with that. And so quite often audit and risk might be a combined committee, but in a small organisation, it's the board. It's the board, and I've chaired those sorts of organisations, so I understand that world. But the challenge is that if, as part of your mission, you need to be across these risks, and you don't have committees, then you need to be meeting frequently and longer to get through the work. And I think that's the challenge. What's the right setting, and are you able to apply yourself as a board to that?
Can I throw a hypothetical case study on you to just understand? So there are two organizations. One is a 70 to 80 year old not-for-profit large charity, $70-80 million business, and then the other one is $15-20 million business, 10-20 years old, not that old. They're still, the purpose is right, but they're growing. They want to grow. So this board have been operating for the last 4 or 5 years, the same set of people. And I'm going to talk about board mindset. So one board mindset is, let's maintain what we have. Let's not grow faster than we need to. Let's control the leakage. Let's, less risk taking. But on this one, because they're younger and then they just came through a strategic planning conversation, they want to grow and they are taking a bit more different risks. They're not having that much conversations on the financial challenges, but they are saying, let's grab that opportunity. Let's do that. So there are two different board mindset to look at. And I want you to assess that for me, these two mindsets, and then suggest how would you go about.
Yes, without having all the context, it's you can only hypothesize on certain things.
Yes,
but I think as a younger board or the earlier stage board, if you like. Yes, it would be natural to have that growth mindset of, we've had this initial thought and mission, this compelling reason to come together and start what we've started and do what we're doing. I think what's most important is to be making sure that that mindset has to be around being unquestionably sustainable in the first place. Because if, the altruistic pursuit of mission and growth at all costs or importance of scale, if that's not tempered with, but we need to be unquestionably sustainable, then they may well, flame out. And so I think it's about having that balance. I think if you contrast that with the mindset of the mature organisation, they can't become stagnant either. And so the importance of revisiting their business model, is their business model sustainable? And are they allowing, has there been atrophy in the business? And so parts of the business have gotten slow. It's just been the way I think we do things around here. So there's culturally, it's quite embedded, and it's very hard to get away from old habits or, favourite parts of the business or whatever the thing might be. Their mindset really does need to be an openness to renewal, regeneration, and also to challenge the golden assumptions that such and such has always been our bread and butter, and so therefore we must hold on to it at all costs. I think those entrenched views need to be constantly challenged in today's world because people's perception of values change, society's expectations of us change, government interference or regulations change. And it just may well mean that the mission that we started 80 years ago, we can't deliver in the same way. And we need to find ways of refining our purpose and finding a place where we can thrive, not just survive, unquestionably sustainably for future generations. And so that's really incumbent on that older board not to be so entrenched in historical purpose, mission and vision, but to really reset it and be open to business model innovation to continue to thrive.
One of the opportunities to rejig or understand the purpose again and question all those golden assumptions. That's a good word. I like that one. The golden assumptions is the process of strategic planning. Going through the whole strategic planning. And I've observed that there were 5-year plans, now they're 3-year plans. People are moving from 5-year to 3-year plans, which means probably people are assuming things will change more rapidly than they would have thought of in the past. And how do you see the change in one is term? And how is that process of bringing the boards together to be involved in the planning process of the next 3 years is critical?
I completely agree with the shortening of the horizon. I think good practice for boards is a 3-horizon approach: 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 plus. Some organisations are going, we're just trying to get through the next one. So I understand that too. But I think you've got to have ambition beyond the first year, and we need to just get through this. And so I always think about the strategic planning as clear and fuzzy. You sort of need to be really clear that that's the direction, not that. Now, 3 to 5 years of that direction might be a bit fuzzy, but it's clear that it's still this and not that. And so by having a set of strategic outcomes that are agreed by the board, or a statement of strategic intent that's agreed by the board that really talks to the narrative of beyond just 3 years, is really important to understand, have, and be aligned with. I think once the board has outlined that overall strategic ambition and the outcomes that are required, then you can sort of backcast to say, well, this is where we are now. What's realistic and digestible in the first horizon, then maybe the second horizon. And third horizon is really utopia, but we actually need to understand how this needs to or might evolve. Then I think the setting of the 3-year plan becomes the board's focus, being very clear it's this and not that. Sometimes boards, it's all of that, and that's not helpful to management either. And so by defining the specific outcomes and what it might be, the milestones to be hitting at the first, second and third years is the next discussion, I think is quite important. And then in reality, year 1 of the 1 to 3 year plan becomes the tactical budget for the next year's financials. Why would it be different? And so it also helps in capital allocation, the thinking about putting aside funds for IT advancements and improvements. It really becomes a great trellis and a framework to run and govern the business.
AICD runs, there are multiple similar AICD does surveys every year and then publishes their data every year. And when one of the surveys I was reading through, that one trend I have seen across the years of the survey of that most of the charities or most of the not-for-profits, they are more and more worried about sustainability. And more of the boards are actively talking about mergers and acquisitions. So that's always on the table, and then that's been an ongoing conversation, which is led through sustainability conversation probably. What do you see that trend as a function of?
I think it's fiscal reality in terms of organisations not being able to continue to deliver on their mission in a sustainable manner on their own. And so they're seeking to understand how can we perpetuate, because there's still a fight to be fought, a need to be met, a right to be wronged, whatever it might be. So how do we not give up on that, but look to see how we might have a more strategic partner or inevitably merge with another organisation to continue it. So I think the demand will never go away. It's how do we pursue it is the thing. And if they're really true to their responsibilities as a board, they'll be able to work out whether or not they're unquestionably sustainable pretty quick. If they're having to make the decision in the moment because the wolves are at the door, then they probably haven't done enough, or they've underestimated the emerging risk and how quickly it's come on them. And so they're trying to respond in the moment. So I think it's interesting. In the in another sector I'm involved with, which is the customer-owned banking sector. So we don't have shareholders, we have customers who are the owners, so there's no intermediary. So we're regulated by APRA. So it's the mutual banking sector, credit unions, mutual banks and so forth. APRA requires us to have what they call a Plan B. So if I'm the chair of my organisation and you're the chair of a sister organisation in the sector, APRA requires us to nominate who our Plan B is in the event that we look like we're going to become unquestionably sustainable. And so APRA know that we've both agreed that in the event one of us continues to struggle, then we would look to negotiate, we have initial discussions to merge. When I think about some of the not-for-profit sectors, and you think about the disability sector in particular, my belief is that no organisation is an island. We all play a really important part of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so if one part of the ecosystem fails, the ecosystem fails.
You're right.
And so, I remember talking to a recent minister about this, and I said, I don't understand why we don't have formal Plan Bs in the sector. Because you hear CEOs and chairs are chatting with one another about, we're sort of really concerned once we get past this year, or it's been another year of no therapy margin increases in NDIS, and so there's these open discussions that people are sort of struggling or concerned about ongoing sustainability. Yet when you look at the statistics from the reports, it would appear that not many people are doing the slow dance talking to one another.
No.
And so I would like to think that, some sort of more formalised approach, if we accept that disability as a sector relies on an ecosystem of providers, rather than with the NDIS framework in place, whilst it does many wonderful things, it also brings its own set of challenges. I really do think it's incumbent upon the sector, if it's not being asked to do it through regulatory reform, it's incumbent upon the sector to be more formal about how do we work together as an ecosystem as we need to grow or purge in order to maintain it. I'd love to think there's a more strategic approach, but it just doesn't seem to be happening that way. And I think that's
You're arguing for a use case for a cooperative in the disability. That's what you're arguing for.
No, I suppose I'm thinking about
I'm not
principles.
intentfully, but what I'm saying is whatever you're saying is a good argument for a cooperative to come together and then see, these are the challenges we all are facing. We all are spending money on technology transformation. We all are spending money on which is, admin stuff, admin work, which everybody's going through, or regulatory work.
Yes.
Why can't we come together and then understand our challenges? And part of the challenge is, if you're not sustainable, it'll fall back on me or somebody else to support each other.
Yes. And, great example is, Rocky Bay has invested in some, really good facilities in our hubs. And I've spoken with, chairs of organisations to sort of say, look, we've got capacity in terms of the real estate that, instead of you creating additional offices and so your therapist can work at it, you can sublet some of our space and we're still providing the service in the community. You don't have to duplicate the offices. We can get additional income and sweat the asset. But quite often those discussions don't go anywhere. They create other facilities and put other, which is entirely, I get it and I understand it. But if the same organisations then turn around and go, well, we're not unquestionably sustainable, we go, well, there's another way. So yes, I just think, I think the sector talks to itself and with one another quite well. But I'm just not sure about, if there's not a lot more we can do, or there is a lot more I think we can do to cooperate in the interest of the people that we're serving.
But as I was listening to you, I thought, he's arguing for that case. Essentially, that's where we started the conversation today. I am a fan of mission-based organizations which are regionally based. and produced from those regions too, and there are many examples of that. And I very strongly believe, to give an example of Albany, an Albany-based organization serving people of Albany with a very localized purpose of delivering services to people living in Albany. People who are employed in that organization are living there and they know each other very well and they can deliver a more customized service.
Yes.
But as the regulatory frameworks are getting difficult, sustainability is becoming challenging, there are more mergers happening. So what's happening is those smaller organizations are being merged with the larger providers. And what's happening with that angle is the customized service which was available initially is not available because it has to be structured in a federated model of an organization based on the East Coast, because they're larger and that's the only service we will give. That's the product and that's that many of hours of service. That's it. Take or leave it. So that distance of customer service to the decision has expanded, and the outcomes are not that great.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm aware of that. And the other consequence of that is market concentration among fewer players. So you reduce competition, and so there is no imperative to offer a more bespoke or customised service because they're the only one in town, and it's take it or leave it. And so I'm interested in. I'm sort of looking at some of the models that I'm seeing elsewhere where capital city-based offers are coming in as a FIFO opportunity into the regions, and so they're still able to offer a customised service, albeit on a fly-in, fly-out basis where they might take a team of different therapists up, stay there for 2 weeks, work with the customers, come back again in another month, and try to offer it that way, but to try and compete as a beachhead in town all the time, 24/7, is a bit tricky. So they're trying these different models, and I'm just really interested in that exploration of those other approaches, because I agree, I think that's an unintended, it's an understandable consequence of that dynamic that's going on. And I think at the end, it's the customers that lose, the communities that lose, because we don't have it.
And so from a merger's point of view, so when you are merging two organizations, they both are disability providers. One is that style of merger. The other style of merger is a disability provider merging with an aged care provider or an early childhood provider. So they're two different intents. So what are the challenges do you see in these both scenarios in merging these organizations?
I think any organisational merger, whether it be same sector or complementary sectors, the culture of the organisations are really, really important. So many case studies, as you would know, a lot of businesses or mergers fail on the fact that the cultural mismatch at the very beginning wasn't really ascertained. And so I think it can be successful if you are both coming from a similar sort of cultural framing and paradigm. I think that would be an absolute bedrock of any success. You might look on paper that two similar organisations in the same sector would be a happy marriage, but it can also not be the case, and primarily because of the cultural differences. So I think these go on and are obviously possible, and there are many successful ones, but also many unsuccessful ones. And I would suggest that getting the culture right at the beginning is fundamental to it. The synergies will come over time, but the culture is the way we do things around here and what we stand for, and that's got to be set and gelled from the very beginning for it to be successful and sustainable.
And from there, I think there's a good segue on conversation around culture. How do you create, as an organization, you have a mission and a purpose, and to deliver that mission and purpose, you need to have a style of culture you want to create or support or support that kind of culture is created within your staff members and customers. So how do you bridge the gap between what the go-to culture to deliver that purpose and mission and from where you are?
It's a very topical question, and so if you go back 6 years ago, boards weren't accountable for culture, tone at the top. It was very much a narrative in the business world. Well, no, the CEO is accountable for culture. You can't hold the board accountable for culture. You employ the right CEO to preside over the right culture. And I think sort of, here we are all these years on, and society's gone, well, no, the CEOs report to somebody, and that's the board. So the board ultimately is accountable for the tone at the top of the organisational culture. And so before exploring how the boards might get across that and what their role is, there's a growing narrative around this discussion about boards ultimately accountable for culture to go, well, what's in the discussion about values? Because if you think about it, if you've got a great culture, you're probably living a great set of values as an organisation. And if you haven't defined your culture, but you're living a great set of values, it probably speaks to the culture you've got. And so one of the questions is not does the board sign off on the values, but does the board actually understand, endorse, embrace, live the values of the business which will drive the culture? And so I think a starting point is, do the board really understand, embrace and live the values? And that then sets the tone at the top and then helps the board preside over the appropriate culture in the organisation. I think the biggest challenge of boards is, how do you know the culture you've got? Have you defined the culture you want? And how the hell will you know when you're going to get there and know you're on the path? And so, again, 5 years ago, there were very little, if any, diagnostics or tools or benchmarking surveys that are available for boards to ever get a handle on this. CEOs might do pulse surveys internally.
Yes.
But I think they're sort of marking their own homework in that regard. I think increasingly you're seeing providers now that offer very rigorous benchmark surveys of comparable organisations on a range of culture metrics that enables a board to get, I suppose, validation or verification of what's actually going on in the organisation versus what we think is going on. And I'm hearing frequently now with the cohorts I deal with, boards are asking for very specific culture metrics on a certain cadence. Inevitably, KPIs at a CEO and a divisional level have culture metrics linked to them. And you're also hearing now increasingly that where incentives are involved for payments, that there are culture dimensions attached to group performance outcomes and indicators. So that's the board sending a message to the business that culture matters. These things about culture matters. And there are consequences if we're not achieving the right outcomes around this space. And I think that's really important. That's how the board needs to be up and about and saying what it means about this.
Why is the relationship between a CEO and a chair is very critical to a functioning of a good board and an organization both ways. And then sometimes, you have seen more frictional relationship between the CEO and the chair. So how do you see that dynamics of that relationship playing into long-term efficacy and efficiency of the organization?
So obviously the CEO is the board's only employee, so that's an important thing to remember. The chair is not the boss of the board, and they're not the boss of the CEO. It's really important to remember that. But having said that, they're absolutely the keeper of the relationship between the board and the CEO. They're very much interposed between the middle. And so, I think understanding that and how the chair turns up and performs that role, it's inevitable that the chair will know a bit more about the multiple realities of the CEO, maybe family health challenges or sacrifices the CEO might have made to meet a board expectation or obligation, like cancelling a holiday to, whatever. And so the chair needs to sort of check their bias and their closeness to the CEO. That's why you often hear the term friendly but never friends is the best way to describe the relationship, because it's got to be tempered in that regard. But I think the chair needs to work on a healthy dynamic with the CEO, understand that we're there to, you have the understanding with the CEO that we're there to, trust but validate. Don't tell us, show us. It's not challenging them personally. It's the board doing its job, helping the CEO to get comfort that there's nothing sinister in these sorts of appropriate rigor and assessment and challenge by the board. It's the role of the board. And I think if the chair is able to do that, then you can have a really high-performing relationship between the board and the CEO. We've got our respective roles to do. And if we can come together respecting our individual roles, that's most important. Quite often I think the chair also has to help the board stay in position. As a CEO myself, I really appreciated when the board knew and the chair through the board through the chair knew when to partner with me, when to lead me, and when to stay the hell out of the way. That I think is a really good chair where they can help both the board and the CEO understand what role do we play at this point, at this time. Because there'll be time where we need to be helping and times where we just need to just let it marinate, let the CEO get on with it, and we're there to help.
Lovely. In the not-for-profit space, there are new organizations which are being, coming around, which are social enterprises or, for-purpose, for-profit organizations. And they're also trying to attract advisory board members or, some kind of a governance structure onto them. And because they're new and then newly mission-driven, and how do you see from somebody who wants to be on the boards? From there, what's the value proposition they would see to be on an advisory board member on a for-profit, for-purpose organization?
So I think what would be important for the organisation to tease out is what would be in the letter of appointment and the role expectation of an advisory board member. And I think if that is teased out, so it's very, very clear what the expectations are, where the value can be offered by that individual, but equally the opportunities for that individual to learn and be part of the board's sort of structure and ecosystem. I think that helps both understand what actually is on offer here, what's good for the potential advisor, what's good for the board that's sort of looking for it. And so in framing it up and putting it into that context, I think that will help attract the right people. Then I think from the applicant's perspective, I think because my belief is that with certain boards and certain opportunities, there would be a lot of people interested. And so I think then for an individual that was interested in applying with something like that, it's most important to consider, why do you feel you're right for this organisation at this time in this position? Help them understand your affinity for the sector, the role, and that organisation probably specifically. And then be playing back how you are understanding, how you think you might meet the expectations of the role. And that will help the board discern who are the people that are genuinely, it would appear to be genuinely aligned and understanding of the opportunity, as opposed to getting the impression that you've just received an application that could have been received by half a dozen boards that this potential advisor might have been putting their hat into the ring for. When I'm interviewing board members, whether they be not-for-profits or for-profits, you're trying to get a handle on, so why us and why you and what's that alignment piece? It's really, really important.
On a conclusion question for you is, when you see to add a bit more diversity on the board in terms of a lot of younger people are trying to get on the boards, as you're observing in your training sessions as well, what kind of diversity would you go for to start? If they are thinking, okay, we want to have another board member, or we want to replace a board member now. So what do you see when you are doing that as an organization? Not yours, but generally.
In generally, yeah. It's got to start with the people you've got, and be looking at the skills composition and the diversity that you might have. I often talk about surface level diversity and deeper diversity. So I think surface level diversity is very important, and so that is age, gender, culture, ability. They're what I would call the surface level diversities. When you come down to the role of the board and the decision making that only we can make, it's the cognitive diversity that's really important. When it comes to decision making, do we have enough cognitive diversity, or are we homogenous in our thinking? And so I think you start off with the surface level diversity stuff, and making sure that you've got the right mix that you might need aligned to the strategy. And then you sort of then start to think about, well, what different mental models might we need around the table? And so, as an example, one of the boards that I stepped into a while ago probably had the 3 most risk-averse directors on the risk committee. CEO effectively called them the committee of no. Excellent directors, risk personalities, and they had good cognitive diversity, but actually it was their risk personality that was problematic in that environment. Yeah, we need risk-averse people on the risk committee, but not all of them. And so we were it was a conscious thing that we sort of shot ourselves in the foot with. And so I'm really conscious of, I actually think board composition, a lot of people say that, the most important decision the board makes is the appointment of the CEO. And when I was a CEO, I used to think that. But sort of after sort of 20 years of black eyes and blood noses around this stuff, I actually think it's board composition, because if you think about it, if you've got a great business now and a high performing CEO, but the strategy is to, maybe let's say you're an unlisted public company, high performing business, high performing CEO, but the strategy is to list it. It may well be that the current CEO, who's used to running like their own business, won't perform in a listed environment, don't have the skills to take it through an IPO to listing, and probably wouldn't be disciplined in a listed environment. And so the strategy trumps the selection of the CEO or the retaining of the CEO. So getting the right strategy trumps CEO selection. How do you get the right strategy? The right board. And that's where the cognitive diversity thing comes in. So I think having the cognitive diversity to help develop the strategy, which then ultimately will help with the CEO, is the key piece. Making sure it's not just the surface level diversity, but the deeper level diversity is really, really important. And what is now starting to come out, only in recent 6 months, is they're starting to do some behavioural testing of directors coming in. Normally, director appointments were done without any sort of psychological profiling, behavioural testing or anything like that. Now, I'm starting to hear it coming through with cohorts now, that they're starting, especially for committee chairs, board committee chair, they're starting to test for this sort of stuff. And I think it's to get this greater level of cognitive diversity in thinking around the table as well. So it's a multi-layered question, Deb. It's an excellent question, and getting it right, I think, is so important.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks for the opportunity.